Can you share with us your founding story? You and Elisa gave up your well-paid full-time jobs to pursue this venture. You have two little ones as well now. How did it all happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's really crazy because I feel like when you sort of say that, it's true. It's like we started off, like with this idea, and now, we've got a few clinics, we've got a few businesses, 4 kids between us. So it's definitely become quite more chaotic and hectic than we initially, sort of imagined. But yeah, our founding story really was, I was practicing as a chiropractor for quite some time, I think almost 8 or 9 years at the time. And at that time I was kind of practicing in a few different settings, and I had actually finished my MBA as well, I believe 2 years before that. And I was trying to kind of piece the two together. And it was really funny because a lot of people told me during my MBA, they're like, are you like, you must be doing the MBA to start a clinic. And I thought, no, like, that's not what, that's just so obvious. No, that's not my intent. And so I was kind of, almost hell-bent on not doing it. And then I think as I got more immersed in my practice, I started to really realize so much opportunity out of limitations. Being in practice, I just noticed how much disconnect there is in patient care. I noticed how much, we all go into it, medicine and healthcare to provide solutions for our patients. But so much of it is so individualistic and siloed because, practitioners just don't have the same, I guess, interconnectedness as they could have. And let's be honest, we're all really busy. I mean, practice is busy enough when you're managing your own patients, let alone trying to figure out all the other pieces of the puzzle to your patient. But yet, we're learning about patient-centered care, we're learning about holistic care, and we're learning about, all of these different models that are going to advance our outcomes in our patients. And, it's difficult. So the idea was born out of necessity. I would see how many of our patients would be referred out for things. And, again, not really knowing what happened with that patient, the patient really needing to be the advocate of their care was kind of the founding backstory of why I thought a clinic like this was really important. And I think both Elisa and I are like both of our dismay, like we didn't realize that there weren't a lot of clinics that were quite as comprehensive as Integra became. And initially, you look at that as an opportunity. And I think what we realized was it's just very difficult to start something that big right away. And I think that's really the reality of why there's not that many, sort of clinics after opening. We soon became, kind of that one-stop shop health model. And now we've kind of grown to a point where, we've really expanded in a lot of different areas. So that was kind of our story, really just, seeing an opportunity and realizing that, hey, we could do this. Between her background in running and managing a clinic to my, experience in practice as well as my MBA, it seemed at the time like a perfect combination in skills to be able to do something like this.
And what was the competition at the time? Were there other comprehensive clinics at all when you thought about Integra and the idea?
So, I mean, multidisciplinary clinics have been around for a really long time. I worked in a clinic too with doctors and, physios and chiros. So I definitely think, there's nothing new about a multidisciplinary setting. I think what was missing was just how connected different services were under one roof. Because you often would find, sports medicine clinics, women's health clinics. Like you found a lot of these like subspecialty clinics that were maybe broader, but again, nothing that really kind of took full comprehensive medicine and brought it under one roof. And I mean, really, it was interesting because when we developed a business plan, because every business should have a business plan, when we developed our business plan, looking at our competition, we were divided because we said we have competition with private medical centers that are big, like just like us, but then they lack primary care delivery because they don't really offer family medicine and walk-in services. They're very different. And then, when we compared ourselves to the typical sort of family medicine clinic, we were much more broad than that. We were much more broad than a sports medicine clinic. So even till today, we struggle with that. We actually look at competition and our competitors almost in sub-domains of our office setting. So we kind of have different disciplines and we sort of look to each discipline to sort of see how our competition in that discipline really behaves, less so around who is exactly like us, because we recognize we are a little kind of in a little bit of a unique
blue ocean, right?
Yeah, we've called ourselves a hybrid from day one. And I really feel now more and more, I really do feel like we operate like a very big hybrid model compared to most of our competition.
How did you know that this had to be a partnership versus, you doing it as a solo entrepreneur?
You know what? I think it's interesting that you said that solo entrepreneur part about doing it independently. I actually just did a post today about, how not all clinicians are groomed or should clinic owners. I recognize that right away in myself. I don't think that, we as clinical entrepreneurs get enough of that sort of training in school to realize that there's a lot that goes behind the scenes. It's not just about setting up a room or an office space and having your patients come in and you do a couple of Instagram posts. It's not that simple. I think for a lot of people, they're just not cut out for entrepreneurship. And for me, I knew that I am not in this to do this myself. I don't need to have full control. I don't need to have full credit. I don't need to have full autonomy in every project. What I do need though is support in the areas that I'm lacking. And I do realize, and I've always continued to realize that, the only way to really grow is with putting people who are better than you in certain into your business to really allow you to shine in the parts of your business that you're good at. So Aliza and we actually met at work. She and I had a lot of shared connections. We had both gotten married in the same year. We picked the same wedding planner. We had a couple of the same common friends. And, it was really interesting because she was a few years younger than me. And I don't know, it was just really interesting that we had a lot of these parallels and synergies in our life. And we actually just became really close at work as friends, and as she kind of, advanced in her role in the clinic and in managing it, and I advanced in my practice, we just started to, share a lot of our similar sort of interests in healthcare and some of the ideas we thought would make, a really great solution to the downtown core in terms of a healthcare solution. And that's really how this all kind of started to become evolved into a real idea.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And what was that time frame like, from the idea to when you were able to launch?
So we had an idea. The idea actually was born 2 years before we even started. And I always say this is very common of a lot of people where you're half foot in, you're not really fully invested. And at that time, we started to do a little bit of research. We started to kind of look at what was needed. We had a couple of other people that we were talking to potentially, do it with. And, you could easily at the time tell that there was no ownership of the idea. There was no execution, but it actually stayed an idea. And it stayed an idea until 2 years later, I believe, or a year and a half later. A lot of things happened in between. I had a child, there was a couple of things personally that was going on. So the timing also just wasn't ideal. So I had my daughter and she was around 6 months old. And my business partner and I, at the time, again, we just started talking, just bringing the idea back to life. And it honestly got launched in minutes is what it felt like, because it all sort of got back on the ground by one phone call. We made a phone call to a potential space in the downtown core that had a listing, a building that had listed a property up for lease. And I thought, let me just call them. And I made that call, and they realized just how much we were missing our research. We knew nothing. I was just yeah, I saw you have a space. I just wanted to know a little bit more about it. And he laughed at me. He said, "Do you have an agent working for you?" And I said, "No, I'm just looking." And he's like, "What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a chiropractor. I'm just looking to start a clinic." What kind of clinic? Because I was looking for 4,000 to 6,000 square foot spaces. And he's like, "Do you know how much the rent is in downtown Toronto?" And I was like, "I don't know. That's why I'm calling you. I wanted to learn a little bit more." And anyway, it was this, he actually worked at TD Towers. I do remember this. And he laughed at me and he said, "Look, I feel bad for you. I'm going to introduce you to a friend. He does this for a living. He will help you find a space for your clinic. Maybe he'll tell you to move on to a different location, but the financial district, it's a big beast. Are you sure? Who's your advisors? Who's your investors?" And I was like, "Oh, me and my business partner." Did not sell ourselves at all in terms of our capabilities. Anyways, we met with his contact, and he took our idea completely 100% seriously. He believed in us from the day that we met him. And we had, like I said, no experience. We had no track record in financial district. And at the time, it was very difficult to get your foot in the door. And so he actually helped us find our location within about a week or two after meeting him. And from there to when we opened was 7 months later.
Wow.
Yeah. So my daughter, when we opened, was 14 months. When we had this conversation about looking at spaces and meeting with our saving grace, his name is Garrett. So hi, Garrett. Thank you for believing in us. We actually met him when my daughter was 7 months. So the entire inception from start to finish, it was very stressful, but it was about 6 to 7 months.
And in that time, you had to organize all the funding and all of that.
Everything. Right? It was so stressful. We had to do pretty much all of that while she kept her full-time job. I was still practicing pretty much full-time. I just had a baby at home. So lots of the things that we all talk about, mom guilt, just completely feeling like you're failing at everything and not knowing what you're doing. Is this right? Is this the right decision? A lot of people asking, are you sure you want to do this? Right. You have a really busy practice. You're so, you're successful enough. why are you doing this? And this is a big risk, because it was a 5,000 square foot undertaking in the financial district in a AAA building, you know, with no track record. And yeah, we didn't start off small by any right away.
And how did you deal with all those negative voices and the people who weren't supportive of your initial idea?
You know what? I think for me, I've always been one of those people. I don't know what it is, but I kind of like to face the challenge when I'm kind of told otherwise. You know, I had it even when someone told me I wasn't going to be, you know, strong enough to be a chiropractor. I wasn't going to be successful as a chiropractor. I wasn't going to be respected as a chiropractor. So I take a lot of those things. I said, oh, well, you know what? Everyone's just, let me prove them wrong. I'm going to go into chiropractic. I mean, it was an expensive risk to take because I spent $120,000 to prove people wrong in my tuition, but I'm glad I did it because, you know what, it was what I was passionate about. You know, I had the choice of doing dentistry and I was looking at a few other professions, and chiropractic, I just loved how the challenge, it was just a challenge. It wasn't mainstream at the time. You know, this was 15 years ago, and there wasn't a lot of diversity in the profession as well, you know, and I just thought, you know what, I feel like I've got to sort of test this out and trust my instinct. And I think I've been like that from ever since a very young age. I think, you know, even now I still get quite a lot of unsolicited business advice. I get a lot of, I get a lot of interesting comments, interesting sort of, you know, things that just naturally sort of, I think people sometimes don't even realize they say to you to discourage you or demotivate you. But I think, you know what, for the most part, I kind of just stay true to what my goals are, what my values are. And I think you just learn to be resilient as a business owner. You learn to be resilient as a mom. There's just so many things that I feel like, you know, you just kind of, you just grow a backbone in such a different way with these phases in your life. And I think over the time of just all the challenges and all the difficult situations that we've faced, I just feel like, you know, each time you kind of feel like this is it, I can't take anymore, I can't possibly bear anymore. And you get through it and you feel like you've got a little bit more, you know, strength on your back from it. And you just realize as you take on new challenges, like it just makes you stronger.
It's such a great story that you mentioned with Garrett, because it speaks to the importance of having someone who believes in you.
1,000%. I mean, honestly, like, especially at the time when, you know, people were like, oh, are your husbands running this? Who are your investors? You know, because again, it wasn't, you know, your typical, what most people would assume to women when their early 30s were off to start and embark on. There was a lot of stereotypes, you know, at the time. You know, you imagine, you see what goes on in social media, you know, when you start a business, people have their assumptions that, you know, you're starting something. And it's not to break any of the other, you know, amazing things that other women are doing, but I think women are guilty of this just as much as men. But I just think, you know, we have this sort of self-limiting belief that our entrepreneurial vision or sort of, you know, capacity is to be starting at a very low risk, because we are meant as women to not take on risk, but we take on this lower sort of capacity of what we should societally, you know, be comfortable with. Right. And then, you know, when you have someone who's trying to, you know, take on something that's a little bit more challenging or not conventional, it just naturally gets questioned. And I think for us, like, I mean, you know, we still are, when we compare ourselves to the size of, you know, to the size that we are to our competitive, you know, clinics that are as large as we are the only female-owned run businesses that are women of color. There's not very many of us. It becomes a lot lonelier when you kind of start looking at who are your other female counterparts that can sort of relate to you in your business and what you're doing. It definitely becomes, you know, less and less as you do grow. And I think, you know, it is important that you have someone that believes in you, because I think, you know, if it wasn't for, you know, those few people in the beginning that actually took that chance to say, yeah, you're taking a huge risk, but I believe in you, you know. And, you know, of course we had other people that did that too, like our bank that actually gave us money. Totally shocking, right? Like, so yeah, so, you know, we definitely had a few people that definitely believed in us right from the beginning, but I would say it wasn't the norm, that's for sure.